check out ESPN Film's newly released 30 for 30 podcasts. From the producers of our award-winning documentary series, this is an amazing collection of sports stories you need to hear to believe. Speaking of amazing, Delta Airlines and the Fly Delta app make your travel experience amazingly easy with real-time bag tracking, e-boarding, and passport scanning during check-in. And don't forget to download 30 for 30 podcasts to fill your flight with stories that will keep you coming back for more.
We welcome you back. It's been a good one. A lot of conversation. Luganville by Brent Zwerneman. We also have the athletic director at the University of Missouri, Jim Sturck. Pat Forty will join us later, talk about the most interesting coaches, also get his take on what is happening in Ole Miss, where the news has not been good for some time. And Dr. Charles Wilson, the retired professor at Ole Miss, quoted today in a much-discussed USA Today article. Other headlines to share with you. Greg Schiano calls the current Ohio State D-line the most talented he's ever coached. He was once a head coach in the NFL, just in case you were wondering. One of his D linemen, Michael Hill, will be suspended for the first game, that epic Thursday night game in Bloomington. He's got a pretty good D-line. Got 9 ESPN 300 D linemen. Alabama had 7 last year. So, yes, it's pretty good. Meanwhile, very troubling story at Youngstown State. A petition started to dismiss a Youngstown State player involved in a rape in Steubenville, Ohio. It's gotten the Steubenville rape has gotten gobs of attention over the last 5 years. It's interesting that the students are protesting to the president and head football coach. The head coach is Bo Pelini. Yes, that Bo Pelini. And the president is, the senator, Jim Tressel. Yes, that Jim Tressel. Malik Richmond is the player in question. I believe he is a walk-on. He has not been given a scholarship, but it is creating a enormous amount of ill will on that campus. Let's take some phone calls here at 855-242-7285. Glad you are with us here on a Monday, not Saturday. We're talking about Saturday. Let's continue with more phone calls here. And David is in Tennessee. How are you, David? Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. It's such an honor to talk to you. I love you. We love you down here.
Thank you very much.
You're such a gentleman and a scholar of football, and that's why I wanted to call with this question. I heard you earlier in the show. You said one of the guys was going to be fired, but he wouldn't get to coach the bowl game. And if you earn, if the coach, sure, it's not a great season, but if you earn, you win the right to go to the bowl game, shouldn't he be allowed to coach it? I
think it depends on the circumstances. Let's just play this out for a second. Let's say it is Kevin Sumlin. He wins 7 games. The last game is Thanksgiving Day or that weekend, and you just don't want the guy hanging around for this reason. You're going to bring in a new coach. You don't want him sitting around there having ill will. Sometimes I've seen cases where coaches have been fired, but normally if you only win 7 games at a school like A&M, you probably are better off being shown the door and not hanging around.
Well, my contention was the guy did get you there. Barring the ill will, but what about the players?
Listen, you're still firing him though. Once you're gone, you're gone. And listen, I'm not crazy about they call me in today and say, hey, we're not continuing our relationship with you. And I said, well, okay. And then the next thing you know, there's like 3 security guards grab you, and
exactly.
That's a little too much. But in college football, though,
wouldn't you want to see it through? These coaches and staff, and they're always worried about. They say they're concerned about. Wouldn't it show something better if you said, this is what we talk about, seeing it through, and we're going to let him see it through. He got you here. Sure, it ain't great. And all, I just wonder about the logic.
David, I'm not arguing with your point. I'm just basically telling you that the way it normally works is you have no chance of seeing it through. And on one level, I think you end up getting in the way because there are a lot of things going on, and most important, you probably bring in a new coach who won't be coaching in that game. You'll have an interim coach, which is silly, but it happens. There's no right answer to your question, but I certainly understand your perspective.
Yeah, I just wondered about the logic of it. And hey, I just wanted to tack on, I guess you answered my question, but I just wanted to tack on being a Vol fan that, we love Jones down here. And, there's a lot more, I think. Sure, the brick by brick. He's done, missed a few bricks maybe. I don't know. But you know what I mean. I don't think the wall.
You know what? Let me ask you a question, David. If you eliminate the brick by brick, you eliminate the champions of life, would Butch Jones be better off today?
Well, I don't know how to answer that, but there's a lot more to winning every year. Maybe not to some people, but when you look at these players, man, they're teenagers. They're very young adults, and I think a lot of people forget that they're putting, their children's futures, their character in these coaches' hands. And would you rather just win a national championship with half the people going to the penitentiary, i.e., some people down very far south, or would you rather, hey, you had a pretty good winning season, you got a little, it wasn't totally embarrassing. Sure, you didn't get, you get what I'm saying? Does that not count for anything?
No, listen,
I'm like you. He's not on the hot
David,
seat this year.
I don't know what
I don't know. And we like Jones,
Well, listen, you're supposed to like him. You're a fan.
But you got to win. I understand that. But, my God, you're in the SEC. Everybody can't win.
No, you're right. It's well done. Well, listen, thank you for the call. And David brings up a lot of good points. He's a fan, and I think sometimes fans get a little tired of pundits, but we're just looking at things and giving quick opinions. That's all. I don't think Butch Jones is going to lose his job this year. I think it would take a cataclysmic season for him to do so. Will there be chatter if he has a bad year? Of course it will. This is his fifth year. But that's standard. And I bet if you got Butch Jones aside, he wouldn't find that to be dramatically outrageous. Thank you for the call, though. I do appreciate it. Tim is in Mississippi, and you are next up. How are you, Tim?
Hey, Paul. How you doing?
Okay. Appreciate it.
I was reading in the Ledger, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where they were talking about all this mess in Ole Miss. It could result in the Egg Bowl being bigger than the Iron Bowl this following year because of all this going on. The only reaction I've got to it, Paul, is 3 years ago, everybody knew this was coming. Everybody in Mississippi knew that this was coming with Hugh Freeze. That's all they ever talked about. Even when he started getting these big recruits, they all knew that this was fixing to come down on him. Do I think he got thrown under the bus? Yeah. Even yourself last year, Paul, you said it yourself. The more Hugh Freeze opens his mouth, the more trouble that he's getting him into.
Well, Tim, you're right. It should not be a surprise. The one, it's a quote from Shakespeare, but Freeze and his compatriots did a lot of protesting, and some would say too much. And I do think he invited people to come after him. There are countless mistakes made. Here's the problem with putting the final bow on the Hugh Freeze story. I still don't know why he was fired. Do you?
No, I don't. I know he was thrown under the bus. To me,
yeah, all of a sudden, the guy that was accused of cheating, and I'm not talking about cheating in a small way. I'm talking about cheating in a big way by the NCAA. That was perfectly fine with his bosses. But all we know is he missed out on escort service, and next thing you know, he's out of work. Now, do you believe that was the reason he got fired? I don't.
No, how do we know that how do we know Ross didn't go in his office and made that phone call?
You have no idea.
It's only a few seconds.
Now, the question is, what did those records indicate to his bosses that we don't know? I have my theory. You probably have yours. Something tells me it was a lot worse than calling an escort service or using an escort service.
Yeah. I'm a State fan, but I do know that this man, my kids go to school there, and I do know that this wasn't right. You could tell he was thrown on the bus, but you're going to get the platform Thursday. You'll get to ask the main man all the questions Thursday.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I'm really interested to see what Ross Bjork will say here because I know what he said the last time we interviewed him about Hugh Freeze. I'll be interested to see what he says about him this time. We will take a break. Pat Forty, who knows a lot about that story and certainly prescient in some of his predictions of what would happen in Oxford the last few times we have spoken to Pat. He'll join us coming up. More of your phone calls. Ross Bjork will join us on Thursday. Welcome back to our program. 855-242-7285 is the number. Let's grab some more calls. And Jack is in Kansas City. Hello, Jack. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul. Nice to talk to you again.
Thank you.
I realized last time we talked, I did most of the talking, and I didn't ask you any questions.
No, that's how I love it. I like it that way.
I told you that I was going to bring a different slant than most of your callers who, have this SEC thing stamped in their neck, and that's all they think about. But I will. What did you think about the Coach Stoops resigning from Oklahoma, and how will that affect their season? I've got my thoughts, but I wanted to get yours.
Yeah, listen, I think we all should be lucky to go out the way he did on top with 10 straight wins. I was still surprised by it, but understand it, having spoken to many people, including his brother. Will it have an immediate impact? I don't know if it's going to have a seismic impact this year. I think Lincoln is a good coach, but I think ultimately it will have a big impact because he is a cornerstone. He's a Mount Rushmore type figure. And don't look now, but Mike Gundy has a great program going over there in Stillwater.
That was my one of my next comments was that Oklahoma State has been really solid for several years, and their schedule lays out pretty good. We also talked last time about Kansas State, and you're aware Coach Snyder's battling cancer, and
yes,
also kind of wants his son to become the coach. Have you heard anything about whether the little rumor out this direction that he might resign right before the first game, which would kind of...
I have not heard that, but first of all, I really wish Coach Snyder would have resigned at the end of last season. It was a nice finish, and he is a man who is... I don't claim to know him very well. Every time I've spoken to him, and it killed me not to be able to talk to him this year. We always talk to him during the Big 12 car wash, but it happened to be the same day as the Hugh Freeze firing, and I could not get away to do the interview. I always hate it when a father gets hung up on trying to get his son the job. Someone said that was one of the problems that Snyder had with John Curry when he was there, the new Tennessee athletic director. It wouldn't surprise me, though, because if that happened, the school would really not have any other choice.
He's got a pretty good, Coach Snyder. As you know, I'm a Jayhawk fan, but I don't despise K-State like I despise Missouri. But
no,
he's always pretty smart with his schedule. He's got Central Arkansas and Charlotte at home, and then he's got at Vanderbilt, and they're not the strongest team in the SEC. And then he's got Baylor, who, as I mentioned to you, I predict to be a losing season. And then he's got at Texas, which they'll be better, but they got a ways to go. So,
yeah,
he could be 5-6-0 pretty early in the season with maybe you or me coaching. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Vanderbilt will be a difficult road game. I will offer that. I don't know. To me, it's I feel worse about the cancer than I do about anything else. But he is such a great figure, and I just don't want to see his farewell be tainted.
I agree. I got one more comment, and then I'll save my my other stuff to the next time I call because I want to let other people in there. But yesterday, I think it was, you mentioned somebody called, and I was surprised it came up, but the North Carolina situation and not being on probation yet, and it's been 5 or 6 years, it seems like, and the joke in our part of the country is that the NCAA was so upset at North Carolina, they put SMU on probation because they knew that Larry Brown, they could tag something on him, and nobody would believe they were in the wrong. So
yeah, I think the genesis of that line, you may know, I believe it's a Bobby Knight quote from 40 years ago. He said they got so mad at Kentucky they put Cleveland State on probation.
Well, that's smart. And something. Do you think anything will ever happen with that on North Carolina?
Well, there has to be an end date. I mean, these things cannot go on forever. And that end date, the school has been obfuscating and delaying and spending tens of millions of dollars trying to get Roy one more national championship. So at some point they have to meet with the committee. My guess is it's pretty soon.
Good. Hey, thanks again for letting me in, and I'll try to keep the Midwest represented. And,
Jack, you're great.
Thank you. Bye.
I had a great visit out to Kansas City a couple of years ago, speaking to the Missouri the club out there, and I think it was the Fighting Tigers. Really had a great time. That's an interesting city. For a lot of people don't think of Kansas City, they think it's in Kansas. Well, part of it is, but the majority of it is in the city of in the state of Missouri. But where I had to go, I think I was doing a radio show from there. I had to go into Kansas, and my host didn't really want to drive it. He said they hate Kansas so much they don't even like crossing the border. I mean, that is a serious, serious rivalry. Let's talk to Jim up next. What do you say, Jim?
Hey, Paul. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Listen, I didn't know if you saw the story that ran in several Tennessee newspapers yesterday about an Alabama fan finding a 1972 Tennessee football signed by the whole team and the coaches.
No, I missed that. Well, tell us about it.
Well, I'm the guy that found it.
Oh my goodness!
and I found it in a Goodwill store for $3.99.
And it was signed by the entire Tennessee or Alabama team?
By the Tennessee team.
And
it's a orange and white football.
By the way, that was a pretty good Tennessee team.
It was. I didn't know that until Tom Mattingly, who interviewed me for the story, was telling me about that team. And I'll tell you how it happened is my wife and I, we recently bought a vacation home down in Panama City Beach, Florida, and a week ago Saturday it was raining that day, so we decided to drive over to Destin to do a little shopping and eat some lunch. And on our way back, we were passing through Santa Rosa and saw this Goodwill store, and we kind of like rummaging through, estate sales and that sort of thing. So I whip in there, and almost immediately after I walked in, I looked behind some of these clothes that were hanging up, and on a little table was this orange and white, kind of about a third deflated football. And I'm a big football nut, of course, but I graduated from the University of Alabama in 1979. But it was the wrong color, but it caught my eye, so I go over and pick it up, and I see that it's signed all over the place. And I start looking around to see if I notice any names. I had no idea at the time what year it was, but you can just tell by looking at the football that it's old. And finally, after looking, I see Condridge Holloway on it, who is from Huntsville originally. And so I'm like, wow, this looks legit. And the names, there were I counted 64 names on this ball. And I kept looking, and I couldn't really recognize any of the other names. If it were Alabama players, I would have known them, but not Tennessee. So I did recognize Condridge, and I showed it to my wife. I said, "What do you think about this? You think this is legit?" And she looked at it. She said, "Well, there's Bill Battles."
That is. By the way, I'm curious. What else? Anything else in the Goodwill store? I got one on the way between me and my house. I thought I'd.
Well, yeah, I tell you, that's the great thing about them, Paul. You never know. You never know. So, I mean, I had no idea. So $3.99. Come on. So I'm looking at this thing, and you can just tell
that is amazing.
You can just tell that it's real. You know, all the names are in ballpoint pen. I'm assuming there weren't Sharpies in the early '70s, and sure enough, I buy the thing, and I get contacted. I had put something on Facebook about it.
So who called you?
A gentleman named Tom Mattingly. Do you know Tom? He's a writer for the USA Today.
I think I do know. Well, I tell you what, I will definitely read that when I get home, Jim. Thank you so much. You've given me something to do. We'll take the crowd over to a Goodwill store tomorrow. No telling what we'll find there. Probably some of my former books. We will take a break. Pat Forty on some of the most intriguing people in college football. Also, someone who has covered extensively the Ole Miss situation. We'll get Pat's take on that as well. We were just talking about the most intriguing coaches in 2017, a story Pat Forty wrote. We're going to get to some other issues that we want to talk to Pat about, including his latest on the Ole Miss story. But we'll start on a happy note, Pat, because we're just a happy show. Thanks for your time. We were commenting during the break about no Nick Saban on your top 10. Is that because he's just such a standardized success story, or is there something else to it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. You know, he's certainly a known commodity. He's the best coach in college football. You could argue he's the best coach ever in college football. So, fair or not, that does take a little bit of the intrigue out of it. The way last season ended certainly was intriguing. I'm not sure there's a lot of carryover from that with the loss and the firing of Lane Kiffin and all the tumult that went into it. But still, I think Nick Saban's probably a little bit more of a predicted commodity than a lot of the other guys out there.
Pat, I'm really curious because you're not only a great writer and a reporter, but someone who is able to frame history, having seen so much of college sports. Had Saban won that game, had you been able to wipe the last drive off, would the conversation be really much different today?
I think so, yeah. You know, and it's amazing, and that's how fickle it is and probably unfair in the grand scheme of things, but that's the way sports works, that if Clemson doesn't score that touchdown with 1 second remaining, if Mike Williams doesn't make a heroic catch on that drive, if a couple other things don't happen, Nick Saban has yet another national title, and I think we're making a very strong case he's the greatest coach ever. As it is, he's answering questions about whether firing his offensive coordinator in the middle of the playoffs was a fatal mistake. That's how football is. It can turn on a play here, a play there, and all of a sudden it can rewrite history, so to speak. But, you know, I think his place in the record books is quite secure, but it would have been even more outstanding if they had pulled off that game. And
I'm interested, John, during the break we were talking about Pat's list of the college football's 25 most intriguing coaches, and no one's suggesting it's going to happen, although a loss to Florida State would certainly bring on the conversation. But in watching the great ones over the years, Pat, whether it's football or basketball, we just saw a bolt on Saturday. For what reason, I don't know why he ran in the World Championships, but he could have ended last year with another gold medal, but he kept pushing it, and he ended up finishing third. I mean, trying to find the moment where these great ones stop. I'm really curious about what you have to say, especially in relation to Nick Saban, who is 66 years old.
Yeah, you know, certainly it's an intriguing question, isn't it? You know, I mean, when the peak happens and when the downslide starts, and I'm certainly not ready to say Nick Saban is on the downslide based on a touchdown with 1 second left last year against a really good team. But, you know, I mean, we'll see how it plays out this year. They do start with just an incredible opener. I don't think losing that game, unless one of the other teams gets blown out, will be a kind of damning referendum on either team or either coach. It would be a losing streak for Nick Saban, which is certainly a rarity. It would be 2 losses in a row. but you can lose that game and still end up winning the national championship very easily. Either Florida State or Alabama could.
Pat Forty with us from Yahoo. Another story out today by Pat about the Ole Miss situation, Houston. Now, Pat, you've been all over that story from the beginning. Before we get to today's news, if we could go back a few weeks, if not longer, obviously, with Houston Nutt, what brought this on, and what was he looking for then that he may end up getting now?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you go back to the genesis of this, the point was to get a public apology for Houston Nutt from University of Mississippi for what his lawyer, Tom Mars, has portrayed as, basically a character assassination or defamation by saying that the NCAA investigation was primarily based on problems that occurred under Houston Nutt, and that turned out to not be the case. And so they have sought first an apology, and then with greater aggressiveness as it's gone along, they've sought more. They filed a lawsuit seeking punitive damages. Tom Mars's research ended up taking out Hugh Freeze from his job at Ole Miss. He has certainly been combing through other records in pursuing this lawsuit, and now is a little bit of a deviation, I guess you would say, because he's proposed this really kind of intriguing settlement, I think, of no money for Houston Nutt, but $500,000 to start a commission to promote integrity and honesty in Mississippi college athletics, which he's once again put Ole Miss into a corner here and basically said, are you for integrity and honesty or not? And now it's going to be up to Ole Miss to respond.
And we do have Ross Bjork on our program later in the week. Do you expect a response from them soon?
I don't know. It's been interesting. They've certainly, Ole Miss, I think Ole Miss's dismissiveness of this whole thing is what put them in a bind to a degree, but I'm not sure they feel like they're in a mood to settle this. I'm not sure they feel like they're in a mood to apologize at this point, despite the ancillary damage, I guess, that's been done there. But it will be very interesting, I think, Paul, just to see, does Ole Miss continue to dig in its heels, or does it say, this is a reasonable settlement that might call off this pit bull here and allow us to just get on with things?
Pat, I'm just throwing this up in the air, rhetorically perhaps, but can they afford to apologize? And by doing so, wouldn't they be admitting that they did what Houston Nutt has accused them of doing by communicating with journalists, although everyone knows that happened, and would that not be a violation of some confidentiality agreement that the school had?
Yeah, that it had with the NCAA, and that's where things get a little bit dicey here. There's phone records that show Hugh Freeze communicating with journalists in the aftermath of the release of or at least the story about the notice of allegations, which I wrote in January 2016, and then the false narrative, as Houston Nutt's lawyers called it, coming out thereafter. So, yes, there could be, I would think, some jeopardy in that area. The NCAA is not going to comment on it, so we can't get them to say definitively yes or no. This could open them up to additional possible sanctions, but it would stand to reason that an admission of an apology or that they were involved in this activity could carry some other ramifications.
And on that front, Pat, it seems like months ago we were talking about late summer college football season. Maybe we would know where all this stood with the NCAA. Well, we've pretty much reached that point. I haven't heard anything today. Still got a few hours to go. I mean, where are we with a committee hearing being posted?
Yeah, I mean, seemingly it should be within a couple of months here, because we know that the NCAA has responded to Ole Miss's response to the notice of allegations. So, that should start the clock forward towards setting a date. They may not publicize what the date will be, but, if that came out in late July, if they got that response, generally speaking, 6 to 8 weeks after that, so you could be looking mid to late September for a committee hearing. And then after that, a ruling another 6 to 8 weeks after that. So it will be the timing of it could be, key for Ole Miss to find out their sanctions if they can before they head into a hiring situation potentially to replace interim Matt Luke. and go out and get a new head coach, because certainly any coach that wants that job is going to want to know where things stand with the NCAA before then.
Pat, finally, and I know I've asked you this, but I'll keep asking until I'm not expecting you to give me a definitive answer, but you know more than I do. Everyone thought Ole Miss needed to get rid of Hugh Freeze to help them with the NCAA Committee on Infractions. Well, they didn't get rid of him for that. We all heard the explanation by Ross Bjork. Now that he's out of the way, what changes other than the fact that Hugh Freeze isn't the head football coach at Ole Miss?
I don't think much does. I'm not sure how it helps Ole Miss's case. Some people have argued that it does because they don't have a guy who's been charged with numerous violations on their staff anymore. But as you said, they sure didn't get rid of him for the alleged violations. They stuck behind him. They quite doggedly defended him in their response to the NCAA. So I think they're still on the hook for that stance, and I haven't seen anything to indicate they're going to change that. The other dynamic, Paul, is Hugh Freeze will be in the room, but he won't be in the room as an Ole Miss employee. Does he have any anger, bitter feelings towards the school? Does he, quote unquote, turn on the school? Does the school turn on him in any way in front of the committee? We won't know because we won't be in the room, but that's another potential wrinkle to all of this that could really change the dynamic.
Great stuff as always. Pat Forty from Yahoo. Many thanks, Pat. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Well, some great stuff there on that on the college football season, but of course as well on the Ole Miss case. We'll talk to Ross Bjork on Thursday. We'll take your phone calls when we come back. More guests later. Jim Sturk, the athletic director at Mizzou, was with us earlier. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. More phone calls at 855-242-7285. A lot to do and so little time to do it. What about Daryl from Columbus, Georgia?
What's going on, Paul?
Daryl, welcome back.
Hey, let me ask you something. If Georgia goes big to win the East, okay, if they go, let's say 8-4, if they have 4 wins or 4 losses or more, you think the pressure will be on Kirby Smart? He will have to make some changes in the coaching staff in the offseason?
Yeah, I do. What's interesting about Kirby Smart, and when I talk to other coaches, people either in the business or out, they all agree he's a really good coach, but he didn't have a great first season. He let a couple of games get away, and you know where the complaints are. Daryl, I don't need to educate you as a Georgia fan. You know the person everybody's after.
Oh, yeah, I know who they're after. And you know what? That's the same thing with Muschamp with the Florida. Offensive coordinator was the big hire. Muschamp blew it there with Wise. Here's the deal. Let's say if Georgia goes 8-4 or worse and Smart dumps Chaney. Now, next year will be year number 3 for Smart. The pressure's going to be on him then for the 3rd year, and now he's got a new offensive coordinator coming in. So that's the reason that offensive coordinator hire, especially if you're a defensive guy, is so big on that.
I'll tell you, though, it's hard to get it right. Look how many offensive coordinators Saban has had. His first offensive coordinator did not work out.
Speaking of Saban, okay, do you name me another program out there that the player that gets a DUI doesn't sit the first game? I don't think there's another program out there that lets a player. I totally disagree with that. I mean, he said he wasn't driving the car. You know he had to be driving the car sometime that night when he was under the influence.
Well, listen, I don't want to relive what we went through all last week, but I don't think he drove it under the influence. He walked from the bar, according to what most people believe. He got in the car and he fell asleep.
This is what I think Nick Saban thinks. Okay, Nick Saban says, hey, I cannot change 18 years of behavioral issues in 4 years. And to be honest, in 3 to 4 years, they become somebody else's headache anyway. I am not paid to run a rehab program.
Well,
I'm
first
paid
of all,
to win football
Daryl,
games.
a 21-year-old does not have 18 years of behavioral issues. I think you're maybe being a little bit.
Well, what I'm saying is Saban doesn't care about character, and that's okay.
I don't know about that. I mean, I do think Saban.
Will you really, Jonathan Taylor?
I do think Saban puts a premium on future recruiting, and he knows there is a way to connect with families when he stands up for the player versus the big bad media and the big bad callers like you.
If Alabama was playing Florida A&M the first game of the season, you think that boy sits? Absolutely he does, and you know he does. And I know he does, okay? But it's Florida State, and Saban knows you got to win. That's why he's playing.
Let me ask you a question, Daryl. You still there? No. I'll ask everyone a question. The fans really care about this stuff. They talk a good game, oh yeah, but fans want to win, okay? They'll look the other way now and then. And in Alabama's case, they look the other way because they have total faith, and they should, in the head coach, that he makes the right decision. He doesn't always, but his record speaks for itself. Let's continue with more phone calls here, and Matt is in San Antonio. Hello, Matt.
Hello, Paul. I heard about you guys talking about the quarterback situation at A&M. I wanted to chime in on it.
Yeah, we had a guest on earlier who had what I thought was a surprise name.
Yeah, I was really surprised about that. You're saying Nick Starkel, and I'm really surprised by that, too. I thought it would be Kellen Mond, but you know what? I'm kind of really shocked because I'm just happy that it's either going to be Kellen or Nick Starkel because, honestly, I know this sounds blunt, but I really don't like Jake Humack as a starting quarterback for A&M. He's not a very good quarterback, and I think to go 10-2 this year, if Nick Starkel or Kellen's a quarterback, but if Jake Humack's a starter, we're going to go 8-4 or 8-5 again.
Fair point. Hey, Matt, thanks as always. Joe in Red Bay, Alabama. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paul. How are you?
We are doing well. Thank you.
Well, I heard Darryl talking. You know, of course, he's wanting the Alabama guy to sit down, and he's talking about looking the other way. I can bet you this: the day he was born, he was probably, and still is, so freaking ugly. His mother and daddy probably looked away, and I'm really, you know, I bought a lot of things up lately, and Jim from Tuscaloosa, when he called in Friday, and he talked about the guy answering the phone, not just because he just said, I'm Jim from Tuscaloosa, put me on. I mean, nobody listens to this show or watches the show just to hear Jim from Tuscaloosa. I mean, for him to even think that, he's a moron, and I've been saying it for years. I wish he'd get away from Alabama because we don't want him as a fan. He needs to go to Auburn because he actually acts like he's more kin to our man.
So you're calling for Jim to be excommunicated as a fan, right?
Yeah, he needs to resign because unlike Auburn,
Joe, I think Jim would say he's not really a fan. He don't have time for ball. He's too busy watching Fox News. One more hour to go.
Okay, keep your eyes closed.
Okay.
I want to show you my first ever painting.
All right.
Okay. Open your eyes.
Oh, that's a lot of colors and shapes.
So be honest. What do you think?
Well, I like how if you switch to Geico, you could save hundreds of dollars on car insurance.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Here, why don't I hold your paintbrush while you call them?
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Check out ESPN Films' newly released 30 for 30 podcasts. From the producers of our award-winning documentary series, this is an amazing collection of sports stories you need to hear to believe. Speaking of amazing, Delta Airlines and the Fly Delta app make your travel experience amazingly easy with real-time bag tracking, e-boarding, and passport scanning during check-in. And don't forget to download 30 for 30 podcasts to fill your flight with stories that will keep you coming back for more.
Welcome back. Final hour has arrived. We've had a good show. Jim Sturck, the athletic director at Mizzou, on earlier. A couple of other conversations talking about the Aggies, about Ole Miss's NCAA woes, and Tom Luganville dropped by. He literally came right from the airport. He had spent last week at Hot Take U. He started with his opinion on the Gators.
I think Felipe Frank will likely be the quarterback going into the season for Florida. And if Florida emerges with a quarterback, Paul, I'm telling you right now, that is a college football playoff roster, top to bottom. Their roster, all the components that you look for, if a quarterback emerges, look out.
Some people have said Clemson was a one-hit wonder because of Deshaun Watson and Bo Ware. Other people think that they're going to take a step backwards. Tom Luganville, not one of those people.
I really, truly believe people are discounting Clemson way too much. I think Clemson has earned the right and has proven that they aren't a flash in the pan. They aren't just okay, well, you lose 2 or 3 of these guys, and now we're going to take a dip down. Each and every year over the last 3 years, everybody kept talking about how they lost these guys on defense, and every year they were better. I saw the coaches poll come out last week. If I'm looking at the roster top to bottom, and I'm looking at where this team's at and the right I think that they've earned, I would have gone Alabama 1, Clemson 2 over Ohio State, over Florida State, all over all of them.
Yes, that was a reaction of shock. What about SC? I think they're going to be really good, right, Tom?
I would guard against the SC hype out of the Pac-12. I really would. I think the hype is completely grounded in one individual player, and that player is worthy of it. Is the rest of the roster capable? I still think Washington is the team to contend with. They've got a great schedule, and I think Stanford is a dark horse team. If Stanford's schedule was like Washington, I'd pick Stanford to win the Pac-12.
And the final subject is the Big 12. Bob Bowlesby is a commissioner. He might be advised to turn the sound down.
If the Big 12 does not have a football team that is worth a darn on defense, I don't think they should be allowed into the college football playoff. Unless the other conferences screw it up, a one-loss Big 12 team should not be allowed in the college football playoff. The common denominator of a champion is a great defensive football team.
Whew. Hot Take You by Tom Luganville. Anyway, thanks for the time, Tom. Let's get back to the calls and talk to Jack, who is in Georgia. How are you, Jack?
Doing well. How are you, sir?
Really are great. Thank you very much.
I just want to talk to you about South Carolina football, their schedule in general.
Of course.
I mean, if you really look at it, a lot of those games could go either way. I mean, even the Louisiana Tech game, who knows how to put up a lot of numbers. So I was just wondering your take on that.
I tend to agree with you on that. I think they are going to be quite good. Look at the Gamecock schedule. I still think that first game is tricky. Then at Missouri, I mean, it could be a stumbling out of the gate season if they lose the first game, because I believe Missouri is going to be waiting for them week 2. Kentucky, a lot of hype on that. Louisiana Tech in week 4, and then at A&M. I mean, it's manageable, but they just need to get by. I always believe you have to get by that first game. They did last year at Nashville. It really helped them.
Very true, very true. I mean, you've seen Will Muschamp come out and say that front line or the defensive line for NC State, they could all be entering in the draft anytime.
No, that's a very, very true statement. Thank you very much for the call. Tish is up next. Tish, welcome. Good afternoon.
Hey, Paul.
Hi there.
Hey, I just love your show so much.
Well, thank you very much.
I am a big Razorback fan.
Well, good to hear.
Yes, born and bred.
Understand.
Born and bred hogs.
Well, I hope they have a good year this year.
Yeah. What do you think about Brett?
Well, I like him a lot. We had a chance to talk to him last week. He seemed pretty fired up, but man, do not know whether.
I'm ready to finish. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The Hogs have got to finish. It's time to do it.
The defense, and in particular, the defensive line is the question that we keep hearing about. Worried about those that TCU and A&M game, though.
Oh, yes. But I'll also have a comment on Hugh Freeze.
Okay, what about you?
And our favorite coach in the whole world that we all loved and adored. And you know who I'm talking about. They filed the lawsuit.
Houston Nutt.
Yes, Houston Nutt. We loved Houston Nutt. You know, we really did. And he did great. Thanks for the Arkansas Razorback.
He sure did.
He really did. And I hate that all this has come out. But,
what kind of dog? By the way, Tish, what kind of dog you have?
I've got a lab. I live in the country.
Okay. I'm a big dog person. I was just curious.
Oh, I've got a black lab, and she's barking right now. Probably a bunny rabbit. But anyway, I just love you and love your show. It's, the Ole Miss thing, man, I don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah, well, listen, Tish, thank you very much. Let's talk soon. Appreciate it. Larry is up next. What do you say, Larry?
Man, why didn't you ask if she had a squirrel in the house or, a couple of birds?
I didn't ask you if she had a squirrel, Larry, because I heard a dog barking.
Hey, man, I see Daryl's back.
Do you have a dog, Larry?
Yeah, man, I find them on the side of the road. Ones I keep, but the other ones I help heal them up and get them to somebody,
That's very nice of you.
Well, yeah, I love animals, man. They're great. They're great. You got an animal. You love it.
Yeah, no, I was just curious, Larry.
Yeah, man, that's cool. But listen, hey, Daryl, Goofy's back. Daryl.
He is back.
Elmer Fudd. Beat up. Paul, he's already going off on Alabama, I mean, we didn't do the right thing. It's the same old mess. And Big Ten John, how did you get out of the golf tournament? You and Mark. Put them on, man. If I got time, I want to tell Big Ten John one thing. Are you there?
What's up, Larry?
For those who don't know what this is about, apparently there was a golf tournament between Larry and Rich and the two chickens in the other room. We get it, Larry. We get we get the chicken. Guys, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah. Did we miss the tournament? Was it last weekend?
No, y'all not gonna be in Atlanta. You're not gonna be in
the weekend of Labor Day for the. Are you going to the Alabama-Florida State game, Larry?
Well, sure. And you were supposed to be there for the golf.
Larry, I don't know how to break this to you, but it's the first weekend of college football season. You think maybe Mark and John might have something to do that day?
Yeah, play us golf with them chicken food. They don't want to.
Can we hear him do the chicken noise one more time, please?
Yeah, one more for us, Larry.
Larry, I have to give you credit. That's a pretty good chicken. Walter is up next. What do you say, Walter?
Hey, Paul.
Hey there, Walter. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I want to ask you a couple things. The first thing is about Florida's receiving corps. I think this is probably the best receiving corps that actually is going to show them the stuff. Normally, they don't really show it. They always have the preseason hype, But I think they have an average quarterback. Hopefully with Felipe. You think that they'll emerge, actually show it this year on the field?
Yeah, listen, Walter, I keep getting mixed signals on the quarterback situation, and I'm not there, so I don't know. One week you hear Malik Zaire, the next week you hear Franks. I like the fact that Florida has two options. I thought Zaire going there was really maybe the difference between Florida coming in second and Florida winning. And I'm not sure which one is going to – I think Zaire could be used situationally, but I think the fact that they have another option really helps them considerably. We will take a break. More of your phone calls at 855-242-7285. We are back after this. And we welcome you back. Fascinating article today in USA Today about the culture of the South and how it relates to college football. And we thought we would, we're delighted, I should say, to welcome someone who was quoted quite extensively in that piece, the piece entitled College Football's Grip on the South Grows Even Stronger. Dr. Charles Wilson taught at Ole Miss beginning in 1981 until just recently. He is still considered one of the most learned people in this country about Southern culture, having written books about it, and also editing is the editor of the New Encyclopedia of Southern Culture. Dr. Wilson, thank you very much. What a pleasure it is to say hello to you, and I'm just regretful that I was never in one of your classes. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, I'm glad to be on. I'm a fan of the show and glad to be talking with you.
There's so much to talk about on the Ole Miss campus, but we'll leave that for later on another show. But I am curious, though, because having been there recently, having been being such a fan of that community in terms of the richness and not only the past, but in literature, with, of course, William Faulkner's home being there, something that you've obviously studied and written about. Give us, before we get too deep into the world of college football, just your a little bit on what led you to this field and just how it intersects with society every day in this part of the country.
Well, I grew up in partly in Middle Tennessee. My parents on both sides were from little towns north of Nashville, tobacco-growing country. And so I identified with Tennessee football like my dad did for a while. But then I moved to West Texas and really grew up in El Paso, but came back every summer with grandparents. And when I went to graduate school at the University of Texas, I realized that the South, Southern culture was a fascinating thing to study. I mean, I'm a historian, so I was looking for a great subject, but it was also a personal interest to me. And so it became my career to try to decipher what made the South what it was, what it has been, and how it's changed. Also, I've always been interested in that issue of the sort of continuities and changes in the contemporary South.
And of course, one of your books, I want to make sure I don't misquote the name. It's a rather lengthy subject. It's a study of post-Civil War South, Judgment and Grace in Dixie, Southern Faith from Faulkner to Elvis. A couple of, I don't want to call Faulkner a Mississippi boy. That would not really be justice, but certainly Elvis grew up in Tupelo. I'm just so intrigued by that, and especially the post-Civil War, which I know you've written about and certainly a learned scholar in, how it moves forward to the 20th century and ultimately how it affected all of us with our love of college football.
Well, there's been this long belief that people who've thought about the South advance, that there's some special destiny or mission related to the South. And, of course, the Civil War was an expression of that people believed they should go to war to defend their society. But losing that war left an indelible mark on the South, having to come to, how do you come to terms with defeat in a war like that? And so that always has hung over the South, that sense of defeat. And what happened after the Civil War is a tremendous poverty that settled in because of the economic crisis after the war, the lack of industrialization. The South pretty much put all of its eggs in the basket of agrarianism and farming, and it was prosperous for some people, but not for a lot of people. It's a very hard scrabble past that a lot of our Southern people had, but they developed culture, I think, as a kind of compensation for that. And the great writers emerged. I asked Eudora Welty one time why there were so many great writers in the older South. She said, "Honey, there wasn't anything else to do." But writing, the writers pull from the great storytelling tradition of the South that developed in the small towns after the Civil War and in the early 20th century. Our musicians, of course, emerged with that also gift of word and rhythm, and became the great figures in American musical history. And religion, of course, was the great compensation as well, with a deep religious tradition that developed in the South. Well, sports became part of that. Of course, a long tradition of recreation, of hunting and fishing in the South, but in the mid-20th century, spectator sports emerged, and Southerners really took to those. And it had special meaning in the South because it was a way to victory in a region that had still lived with us generations of memory of defeat. And the iconic figure, of course, was Bear Bryant at Alabama. And he was a figure that symbolized the transformation of the South. He grew up on a sharecropping farm in hardscrabble, Arkansas, but he became a symbol of the transformation of the South into the kind of middle-class South that we now have, a place of suburbs and tailgating and football. And college football came to mean have special meaning the Ohio State-Michigan game is an important one. But, Ohio has the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals, and Michigan has the Detroit professional teams. There aren't professional teams in the South. So we invest a huge amount in our college football programs, I think. And so Alabama and Auburn becomes the titanic struggle for sports fans and other rivalries across the region. And
it's so interesting because I've dealt with it not from perhaps a level of your scholar, but maybe from more on the ground level. But they're just I often hear, Dr. Wilson, I'm curious what you think. I still hear the Civil War being fought out daily on this program when someone walks in here from the north with a take on college football.
Well, there's still that sectionalism that survives despite all of our changes and all the connections between the North and the South and the West and all of this. There's still often a sense among Southerners that they're not treated well in the national culture and the popular culture. Often stereotypes survive. And we have stereotypes ourselves with people in other parts of the country. So that's a deeply rooted kind of cultural trait that even though we travel and meet people from other parts of the country and appreciate them one-on-one, we still harbor these stereotypes often. And, of course, the college football is such an emotionally intense experience, and it involves these great teams from all across the country. And, again, I go back to Bear Bryant. When Alabama played Notre Dame, for example, it was a meeting of the Titans in those days, and all of that regional history and all of that went into those games, and so that was one of the reasons that Bryant became so legendary, is that he won those battles. He won those battles. He proved the South could win, and of course that still survives. Of course, we still have rivalries within our states that reflect a kind of intrastate sectionalism as well. And you're quite familiar with Ole Miss and Mississippi State. I hear that on your program all the time. But all across the South, you have these regional rivalries within the country, within the states. And so it's somehow part of human nature, I guess.
Dr. Wilson, I have to ask, because we've spent some lazy summer days casting movies about Southern football coaches, but you had this line in the USA Today article about comparing today's college football coaches, especially in the South, with some of the old great Confederate generals who continue to be glamorized today, even though I don't want to say this too loudly, the South did lose the war. I mean, not to put you on the spot, but I'm sure you've given this some thought over the years, whether it's Bryant or Johnny Vaught from yesteryear or General Saban of today. I mean, are there any points of reference that you could lead us to?
Well, I think that in the late 19th century, the Confederate generals had this incredible mystique. Even though, as we know, they lost, they came to symbolize a kind of character and old-fashioned virtue that people admired. And I think the college coaches today, the really successful ones, have some of that same mystique. They symbolize success on the national stage, and they're kind of they reflect, though, the contemporary South. The late 19th century was a very different time and that nurtured that Confederate memory. But the contemporary South is a place of business orientation, business success. We admire business people as kind of new icons of our culture. The old agrarian South simply isn't anymore. Bear Bryant would not fit well in today as a kind of cultural symbol the way he did at his time, moving from that older South into the newer South. Now, we admire CEOs and business executives that can bring jobs and symbolize that fact that the South can compete now not only nationally but on a global scale as well. The generals lost, but the coaches win, and that's why they're so successful, I think, and so such central figures in our culture today.
And I'm sure people who read the article you knew differently discovered today something that maybe they didn't know or have never thought about, that one of William Faulkner's iconic books, Light in August, had very little to do with the opening of college football season.
It's true, but Faulkner actually wrote about football. In one of his novels, The Hamlet, he has this character, LeBeau, who comes, he's kind of like Bear Bryant, really. He's a fictional version of Bear Bryant, written 30 years before Bryant came on the scene. But this character, LeBeau, was off of a sharecropper farm in rural Mississippi, but the Ole Miss coach, again a fictional coach, offers him food and shelter if he'll play football on Saturday afternoon, and he does, and he loves it, and he finds this spirit within him that is released on the football field every Saturday afternoon when he carries the football, and it's a wonderful kind of deep literary portrayal of this football player.
I have to ask you quickly. I interviewed John Grisham recently, certainly a proud graduate, both Mississippi State, and he's a big sports fan. But I missed the Faulkner era in Oxford. Was he a fan?
He was not a fan, and of course you got to remember the football stadium is Hemingway Stadium. Ernest Hemingway, of course. That he was not who the field was named for, but he was the other great rival to Faulkner, is the great 20th century writer. But Faulkner was a great golfer. He loved golfing, of all things. But he was not a particular football fan, as far as I know.
So regrettable. I just would have. It would have been so much fun to talk about the games coming up on Saturday. Dr. Wilson, thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time, and hopefully we will be able to revisit this subject. It's not going away. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Oh, wow. How cool. Dr. Charles Wilson, who recently retired after 30-some-odd years at the University of Mississippi. What a great pleasure that was. We'll take a break. Let's you take over the rest of the program now that we've done our incredibly important literary conversation. We will be back with the final 30 minutes after this. You're back with us. Ed, next up. Ed, you there?
I'm here.
Well, good to hear from you.
I just heard next up. I didn't,
Next man up, Ed. That's you.
That's me. Oh, my goodness gracious. Hey, honey, I'm next man up. Okay. What's up? Nothing much. Same old, same old.
Good to hear.
Just wanted to say, now you just flashed on the two boys from the, stock room there.
The stock room?
Well, I'd give them a little promotion. What the hell? I haven't had a chance to respond to John as far as my media guide. Picking good old Red, sitting on the porch reading his media guide. I don't see anything wrong with having a media guide all of a sudden. I mean, John, you have to understand something. When I pick up the New York Times, or if I pick up the Daily News, or even the local papers, there is not a single word of the SEC unless they're talking about...
Ed, let me stop you because we have a lot of people watching. We don't have a lot of time. I mean, I get all that. There are multiple ways in today's world for you in Connecticut or you in on the North Pole to get information on what is happening down here. Of course, this is the best way. There are other ways. So, again, I'm not sure I understand your point. I mean, have you heard of a computer?
Oh, my God. Is there one? What do they do? What are they for?
What's what for? Computer?
A computer.
Computer is to, you have a computer, whatever. Again, they've been out for, I don't know, Mark or John, about 30, 40 years. Really perfected in the last 25. In the last 10, pretty much unbelievably, where you can not only sit in front of them, but you can carry them around, take them to lunch, take them...
I have one, and I get great pleasure out of it.
Okay, so where on that computer can you not get information about the University of Georgia?
That's true. That is true. All I got to do is push a button and ask a question.
Well, no. All you got to do is go to one of 4 million websites and read about the Georgia Bulldogs.
Oh. See, that's why I love the show. You awaken me in so many ways. Anyway, I don't want to pick on anybody today.
John, you're more of a computer bug than I am. Can you help Ed maybe in a quick 30-second primer here?
It probably does only take 30 seconds, yes. Ed, you're cracking me up today. I'm literally crying laughing in this control room.
Fantastic.
A shot of Sambuca after dinner today?
After supper, did you do a shot of Sambuca just to loosen things up before you called?
No, I'm not allowed.
I don't know, Ed. You sound a little loose.
And I'm not giving you a hard time about reading the media guide. It's just it's an old-fashioned way to get your information, which I respect. You're an old-fashioned guy. You like to do it your own way. But like you said, you get great pleasure out of the Internet and your computer, so try it there.
Well, okay.
And listen, we'll talk to you off the air because we cannot waste a lot of time trying to introduce you to the Internet. I mean, Al Gore invented it 40 years ago. Let's go back to the calls. Richard is in Tennessee. How are you, Richard?
Oh, I'm just fine. Thank you for taking my call, Paul.
Thank you very much.
You may have answered this question. I apologize. I just got home today, and
That's
I
okay.
was just wanting to know, what do you think, is the UT coach, Butch Jones, going to be capped this season or not?
Well, only a guess, of course, Richard. I think he will be kept. I don't think he is under the gun to the degree that he would lose his job with anything other than a disastrous season.
Okay. Well, that was my question.
But Richard, you never. It's always hard to predict, though. What is because sometimes seasons can get out of hand. But I think if Butch Jones has a good year, even maybe an average year, and fans still believe that he is leading the team in the right direction or trajectory, then the new athletic director will keep him. I don't think that's on the table at the moment. That's just my thought.
Well, I appreciate it, Paul. Thank you for all your information.
Thank you very much, Richard. Appreciate the call. Good to hear from you. Let's continue. Tyler is in Iowa. How are you, Tyler?
Good. How are you?
We're doing great. Thanks for the call.
So I was just wondering, who do you think is going to be Florida starter for the game against Michigan?
Wow. I mean, you get one school of thought that says Franks and bring in Zaire in situations, and then you get the other school of thought that says Zaire is the best quarterback. I happen to think Zaire is the most experienced quarterback, but I'm not at practice right now. So I still tend to think it's Zaire, but I've had plenty of people disagree with me.
So now, if it is Zaire, what are Florida's chances, do you think, of beating Michigan?
I really like Florida's chances of beating Michigan unless the quarterback situation becomes a mess. I think Michigan is overrated. I believe that, like many others, that they've lost a considerable amount of talent from last year, which was a really good team that underperformed down the stretch. So right now I like the Gators in that game. Thanks for the call. We do appreciate it. Still time for you to get in at 855-242-7285, and we will be back with more after this. Glad you are back with us. Let's talk to Dana in Georgia. How are you, Dana?
I'm good, thanks.
Good to hear.
It's one of my favorite shows. I watch this show all the time.
Thank you.
I love the SEC and love college football. But what I wanted to talk about today is, and I know I'm going to get a lot of people going to get mad about this, but it's about Nick Saban. He is a great coach. I get that.
Okay.
But he gets
what's the but here?
Okay, he gets all the great recruits in the country because everybody wants to go to Alabama because Alabama wins. And right now, my thing is that I'm a Georgia fan, and I happen to think that Georgia's got the best talent in the country. And people just don't stay home. Some of the top recruits in the country.
Hey, Dana, let me offer this about what you said, okay?
Okay.
He built that program. He inherited a team that went 6-7 the year before that did not have great recruits. So It was so bad that not a single Alabama player was drafted the year after Saban got there. So he did not inherit talent. Therefore, he built a staff. He built a program. And I don't think you can say, well, he's got all the players and not give him credit for having built a dynasty there.
Okay. I'll take that.
I mean, it's like saying, so and so who runs that company. It's not fair because they have all. Okay, let's say Steve Jobs was the CEO and founder of Apple. I mean, you can't say Steve Jobs was a great CEO, even though he's considered to be one of the best of all time. Because look at his products. I mean, who wouldn't want an iPhone? Who wouldn't want an iPad? Who wouldn't want a Mac? Well, guess what? He came up with those things. He designed them. So which one is it?
Well, I just think there's a lot of natural talent that ends up at Alabama every year.
Yeah, but
the
only thing I will say to you, Dana, it wasn't there before he got there.
Okay, well, what do you think it is about his recruiting that he gets all these good players?
Well, success breeds success, and you build a culture. And if you're a recruit, let's say you're in New Jersey or California or in Valdosta, Georgia, and you're thinking about, okay, do I want to go to Georgia, which is my home school? Do I want to go to Florida, which is down the road? Do I want to think about Michigan, which is coming into my state, or do I want to go to Alabama, which produces talent every year in the NFL? They're always at the epicenter of college football. I'm not saying everyone would go there. Alabama gets a lot of recruits primarily because every good player, every great player considers going there. And then they get a share of the best players. They don't get every player. Georgia gets a lot of good players. You know that.
Georgia sends a lot of people to the NFL.
Ohio State does. LSU does. They all do. But Saban has, he's got a system that has been very successful, and it's withstood a lot of pressure from a coaching standpoint because he lost one of his best coaches he's ever had in Kirby Smart a couple of years ago. Jimbo Fisher used to be his offensive coordinator. Will Muschamp used to be his defensive coordinator. Jim McElwain used to be his offensive coordinator. Yeah, are you following where I'm going now?
Yeah,
he's been able to replace great coaches and players with more coaches and players.
The main thing I think is that I follow high school recruiting a lot, and this year it just seems like we're losing a lot of players that we've recruited hard. And they're going other places, and it's just frustrating.
Well, no, listen, I understand that, but Dana, Georgia is also recruiting pretty well. But the competition's unbelievable. You have Clemson, you got Michigan coming in now. You got Bama that will pick off one or two. That's the lifeblood of college football, and I think Kirby Smart has done quite well at that so far. Appreciate the call. We had a call from Jack earlier from Kansas City, and I think he wanted to finish his thoughts or add something to it. Jack, since we don't hear from you very often, go right ahead.
Hey, well, this is the third time since I've gotten able to get through, and I'm trying my best. And
I'm glad you made it.
But you kind of hit a hot point when you decided to hit a little deal on Kansas, Missouri, that football game, and Kansas. What about their football? So I thought since my first KU football game was 1956, and we were 0-10 that year, so obviously you're correct that we've had a lot of punishment. I think your guy Mark and John might do a little research and say, to find that there's very few universities that, let's say, win bowl games and go to the Final Four, and obviously Kansas is better at basketball than we are at football. But we've been to Orange Bowls. We've won Orange Bowls. But that particular year, we were 11-1. Forget the preseason schedule. We won 4 games. And then we won at K-State, Baylor at home, Colorado at Colorado, Texas A&M, your new SEC team at A&M, Nebraska 76-39 in.
Okay, hey, let me put you on with Mark and John since you're not happy with them, guys. Come on, let's, this guy's calling you out.
All I have to say is I'm so thankful that there's only 44 seconds left in the show, so I don't have to hear another word about Kansas football.
That's what this was about, Kansas football?
All right. Well, you know,
Jack, that's the problem with youth. They have no patience for history. I was very interested in this.
Well, you know, Coach Beatty is going to be a good coach.
I could listen to you go on about Kansas for at least 10 more seconds.
All right, well, let me just finish with a good story. A friend of mine one time told me, because he was asking about, I have a dog. But,
Jack, there's no chance there's a good story connected to Kansas football. None. If you missed anything on the show, you can catch it on the podcast. It's in the Apple podcast or the Kansas podcast.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, you know, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.